Despite its attractive possibilities, the plan presented problems as well. God's reaction to the human being so involved is well known, that is, his extermination of all of them by means of the worldwide flood. Less celebrated, but equally as awe-inspiring, is his reaction to the angelic participants in Satan's scheme to irrevocably pollute the human race. Following these events, all fallen angels guilty of cohabitation with human beings would be punished with the most severe penalty possible, this side of the final execution of the sentence against them. The penalty for not keeping to their own realm was to be plunged into the lightless abyss, 1 Peter 3:19, 2 Peter 2:4, and Jude 6, a terrifying prospect for these creatures of light, even in their fallen state. This awful prospect motivated the legion of demons who had possessed the demoniac at Gadara to beg Christ frantically not to have them confined to this terrible place. Luke 8:31. We may surmise, therefore, that just as humans are induced into illicit sexual activities in full cognizance of the possible repercussions, so some of the fallen angels were induced, no doubt by the devil, to take this action, even though it must have been quite clear that swift and sure judgment from the Almighty was likely to follow. Satan, by all indications, there are still legions of demons loose in the cosmos, couldn't convince all of his followers to act recklessly in this fashion, and probably didn't want his best lieutenants to do so. Nevertheless, the events described here show that he was able to find a cadre willing to abandon their estate and risk the consequences that in the event did befall them. We have already noted in the first installment of this series the desire of fallen angels for physical bodies, and we may see these events as corollary to this principle. The selectiveness of which Genesis 6:2 makes a particular point, that is, they chose, reinforces this conclusion. Important as well is the fact that these verses betray no idea of force, indicating that the liaisons were voluntary on the part of the women involved, and, given the involvement of patriarchs in the marriages of that time, of their fathers. Genesis 6:3, the Spirit's restraint. And God said, "My Spirit will not strive with man forever in their sinful manner of life, for this is the way of flesh. Therefore his days shall be 120 years. The divine displeasure evident in this verse, very odd if the two preceding verses were only relating normal human procreation, which had been divinely commanded in Genesis 1:28, follows directly on the heels of the intermarriage described in Genesis 6:1 and 2. Verse 3 suggests a double judgment of the most extreme severity. In a mere 120 years, brief by the extended lifespans of the time, God would all but bring the human race to an end. And for the progeny of those who would survive in the post-diluvian world to come, the longevity man had previously experienced, nearly a millennium in some cases, would be reduced to a scant 120 years, and this would be a maximum norm scarcely ever approached and only rarely exceeded. Even in such dire judgment, however, God's gracious nature is clearly perceptible, because for the one family of believers left on earth, that is, that of Noah, the 120 years were an important grace period that gave the necessary time for the ark, God's chosen means of deliverance, to be completed. It is ever thus that by the patience of our God we are delivered. 1 Peter 3:20. Genesis 6:4, the Nephilim. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and afterwards as well, that is, both before and after the start of the 120 grace period before the flood. For when the sons of God went in to the daughters of men, they bore to them those mighty ones, that is, the Nephilim, whose names are famous from ancient times. The transliteration of the Hebrew word Nephilim is standard practice now on account of the clear unacceptability of the Septuagint's giants. The Septuagint's interpretation, however ineffective the parallel drawn from Greek mythology, is clearly to see these creatures as not entirely human, as the Greek giants of myth were not, and that much, at least, is true. By the time we reach Genesis 6:4, interpretations which try and make these Nephilim entirely human have run into a host of difficulties. In the verse quoted, the extraordinary nature of these creatures is directly related to the fact that they are the progeny of the sons of God, a mention that makes little sense if these sons of God were normal human beings. The etymology of the word Nephil, Hebrew Nephilim is actually the plural, is also enlightening. The root, napal, means to fall, and the Katil noun formation is passive in nature here, as is generally the case. Compare Asir, one in bondage or prisoner. The meaning, fallen ones, is directly in line with our understanding of the passage so far, for the Nephilim were 1. Fallen from the ranks of pure humanity, 2. The offspring of fallen angels, and 3. Fallen in the spiritual sense as well, giving no indication of desiring a relationship with God, a conclusion to which we are forced by their failure to respond to his gracious 120-year delay of judgment, for only Noah and his family entered the ark. Genesis 6, 5-7, the divine assessment. Now the Lord saw that man's evil had spread abundantly on the earth. Indeed, the underlying intent of all his innermost thoughts was invariably evil. So the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved his heart that he had done so. And God said, I shall wipe man whom I have created off of the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the crawling creatures and the birds of the air, for I regret that I made them. In our own time as well, mankind is universally disposed towards evil because of the sin that resides in our mortal bodies as a result of our descent from Adam. However, the intensity of evil described here, evil that leaves no place for anything else and is untouched by any other consideration, is a clearly unprecedented state of affairs in terms of both the concentration and homogeneity of the evil involved. There can be little doubt that this rock-hard dedication to evil, which had become the rule on earth, was a result of the majority of mankind at this point being of mixed seed. From their angelic progenitors they had acquired, along with the talents and stature that gave them the fame they still enjoy today, that quality of adamant fixation of purpose which we first observed in our study of angels in the initial installment of the present series. It is also important to note the vast difference between the human and divine assessments of the situation on the antediluvian earth. While mankind is impressed, even fascinated with the likes of the Nephilim, individuals of exceptional prowess, whether physical or otherwise, God is concerned with the heart, with the individual's attitude towards himself and his truth. These pre-flood supermen may be the stuff of human legend and may continue to capture the imagination of mankind even today, but to God, their complete lack of respect for him and a total absence of any desire for a relationship with him were causes of profound regret. Indeed, despite the fact that these semi-humans were in many ways gifted beyond anything today imaginable and would be objects of extreme veneration and emulation by the present-day inhabitants of Earth, God's response to their inveterate evil is completely the opposite. They must be wiped from the face of the earth. God's profound regret and grief expressed here is not in any way to be understood to mean that he was surprised by these events, for history is entirely dependent upon him and his decrees. These events are related to us in language that we can understand. Even though we cannot hope to fathom the true depths of God and his love, we can see from these expressions his merciful purpose for mankind, even for these rebellious, hybrid, angelic humans, and his profound lack of pleasure in their failure to accept that mercy, not wishing any to perish. 1 Timothy 2:4. The Lord is not delaying in the fulfillment of his promise, as some think. Rather, he is exercising patience for your sake, being unwilling for anyone to perish, but desiring all instead to come to repentance. 2 Peter 3:9. Patience, in the italicized phrase, is from the same Greek root as the verb Peter had used in his first epistle to indicate the patience of God during the 120-year grace period that preceded the Great Flood. 1 Peter 3:20, macrothumia versus macrothumeo. Even in the face of such intense, intractable evil, God went the extra mile in providing opportunity for repentance before visiting the ultimate judgment upon the world of that time. Truly, ours is a God to be feared, both for the ineffability of his gracious mercy upon the undeserving, and for the ineluctable and devastating power of his judgments upon those who systematically refuse it in their wickedness.